I really love how Nathaniel applies level 3 storytelling to a personal theme or a personal abstract concept that he's thinking about. He does this very well. In fact, when we were in Cyprus together, I was making my story about the conflict and about the issues on the island, and he was making a story about friendship. And I was like, why are you in Cyprus making a story about friendship? And because that's how he tells stories. He thinks about his trips as a way to explore a broader idea. And I think that's a really compelling and interesting format, one that I don't explore very much and I'm learning from. My version of level 3 storytelling is what I call exploring an issue. The best example of how this works is a video I made a few years ago called Why So Many People Go to Iceland. Why does everyone come to Iceland? I was going to Iceland on a trip with just on a trip together. And I sort of had this natural question, this curiosity of like, why is Iceland so popular in recent years? So I decided to use this trip as an opportunity to tell a story, not just a story of my trip and what I did, like a level 1 context story, and not just showing off the beauty and culture of the place like a non-linear visual sort of artistic story like level 2, but rather to add another layer, to use this trip as a journey to answer this seemingly simple question: why does everyone go to Iceland lately? It's a very similar thing to what Nathaniel does. He uses a trip as a platform upon which to explore a theme or a concept, or in my case, an issue. For me, I tend to emphasize and look into big questions, issues, geopolitical conflicts, obscure cultural histories. And I use the trip as a platform to explain and better understand. So you might want to pause this and go watch the video on my YouTube channel called Why Everyone Goes to Iceland Lately. I think I made it in 2019, so it's been a few years. If you go watch that, it might be more fruitful as we go through the video and I talk about some of the attributes of level 3 storytelling. In order for me to be able to pull these stories off, I need to have some semblance of an idea beforehand. I need to have researched enough of the story to sort of know what the answer might be or what I'm getting at. But I don't know the whole story and I don't know how it's all going to play out. I'm often doing some research on the ground, but I sort of know what I want to say and I know the general idea of what the issue is. So it requires a little bit of research. One reason why level 3 storytelling is more complicated. It requires more planning and forethought than the other two. What I love about this, though, is it's not overly thought out. I'm not coming with a fleshed out script, which allows me to have spontaneous moments, like when we were driving to the town of Vik in the south of Iceland, this black sandy beach, and I had just found this really cool graph on the drive, and then it allowed this moment to happen. I feel like I should draw the graph on this beach. Yeah? I'm gonna draw this graph on this beach, not with my hands, but with animation. This is Iceland's economy. Look what happens, not surprisingly, in 2008. Huge crash. The entire world was affected by the meltdown, but Iceland was perhaps hit the hardest of any country. I didn't go to the beach with that in mind. I went to the beach because our trip had us going to the black sand beach. But because I was thinking about this issue and trying to find a way to integrate it into our trip, I decided that this would be a good place to talk about this concept and to even use the textures and the feel of the actual place to tell that story, to show that data. And just a reminder, I'm using level 1 storytelling to show how we even got to the beach. We're driving and then we're walking onto the beach and there's B-roll that gives us forward motion so that this doesn't feel like it just came out of nowhere. If I had drawn this on in the middle of nowhere, it wouldn't have made as much sense as, hey, we're walking on the beach, let's get the drone up and I can later draw this graph on. Level 1 storytelling is incredibly vital at all times. So is level 2. You'll see throughout this video that I pull non-linear footage from around the shoot And I created this sculpture of beautiful footage and experience to bring people to that place. That's more level 2 storytelling. But then I'm using level 3 storytelling to show a graph. A graph is something that is not a part of my trip. It's not a part of the texture and the sort of soul of a place like level 2. It is a completely new genre of information that I'm using this trip to layer on top. Just like Nathaniel layers on personal reflections or sort of personal theories on top of his trip, I'm doing that same thing, but with data, with information, with reporting, with history. I did this in the Netherlands too. Throughout this video, I'm using all 3 levels of storytelling. There's tons of forward motion like we saw earlier. When I got on the train, we went up north, we biked, we got to the beach. That was a whole forward motion, just linear experience. But then there's tons of drone shots and texture shots that come in to be more level 2 of just the city that I shot throughout the trip and layered in a non-linear way throughout the edit. But then there's tons of moments like this. Look at this map of Holland in 1300. Compare this to a map of Holland today. The country has gained land. So yeah, I'm layering on a completely new level of information that has really nothing to do with what I'm seeing, other than I'm seeing some canals. But I'm not seeing the land that I'm talking about that's been reclaimed from the ocean. I'm not seeing all these like hydraulic engineering marvels that are making this possible. I'm researching it. I'm in the country. I'm seeing signs of it, but I'm using maps and data and history to layer on a much richer version of what my trip is. My trip is my trip. I saw this. It's one perspective. What I'm trying to do is use the trip as a platform to layer on all this other reporting and data that I'm researching as I travel through this country. Unsurprisingly, this requires a lot more effort. It requires research. It requires you to sort of be thinking about structure of how am I going to lay out this information and this explanatory stuff as I'm traveling through this country. You'll notice that I tend to go from information section to fun moment of just exploring the city section to information section to, and it oscillates back and forth, so it still feels like a vlog. Like it still feels like I'm right in level 1 and level 2, but then I'm giving these moments of level 3 where I'm talking about the data, where I'm talking about the history. I'm going to give you some pretty concrete tips on how I outline and research while I'm just traveling in another chapter. But for now, I really want you to think about these 3 different levels and get a grasp on how level 1 is just pure linear documentation. Level 2 is more creative, non-linear, showing a place and giving the texture and personality of a place. And level 3 is layering on a bigger concept, a bigger issue, a bigger question onto your trip. If this level 3 stuff sounds completely daunting and you're not ready to even start there, that's probably a good sign to say, I gotta focus on level 1. I gotta focus on just laying out a story with visuals. Or if that's really familiar to you, focus on level 2, on having a non-linear edit that brings to life the place. Only once you've mastered those will you be ready to move on to level 3. I spent years in the level 1 and level 2 spaces. I really did. And that gave me a really solid foundation for me to move on and start to integrate more complicated data and history into my stories. Okay, so now that you understand these levels and their function in storytelling, let's move on to the next chapter where we're going to talk about how to actually ideate and script and structure these stories beforehand so that when you get there, you feel like you have some semblance of a backbone and a structure. Nathaniel and I have 2 different ways of doing this, and we're going to share all of that in the next chapter.